Welcome to the video online integration for blended learning. So here's some ideas, online actions for integrating blended learning. Really kind of a lot of this is using online and face-to-face at the same time, but this is stuff that's specifically focused on online. It's a lesson introduction, and you can plan that out, thinking of what your objectives are in whatever way so they can see one of the things, the thinking that you have for them, the thinking that they're going to be required to do, and you have some type of introduction activity where they can see each other thinking. For instance, with a Google survey or an online work document that they're responding into. Then you step into the main lesson work, and the benefits of the online part is in history, social studies, primary, secondary sources are best when digitized. Then the useful format work is done to be designed in a self-directed, self-paced way to some extent or another. Of course, you have to use different support strategies. Then you have check-ins, mid-lesson check-in one. You can have several check-ins during this time period. Those check-ins could be with individual students using online communication methods, or it could be viewing the students' work documents. Then the summary, the lesson check for understanding at the end. You could use an online survey for that, or you could simply have a slide on their work document that you're going to be looking at. Now, here is the planning for blended learning in-person actions. A lot of it goes into just thinking, making certain students have the tech pieces necessary at the beginning of the lesson. Then you're talking. You talk through the introduction. You talk when individuals have questions. You talk in the mid-lesson check-ins. And you talk while you're summarizing things at the end of class. And through the whole thing, it's okay to be telling stories and jokes. In fact, that does engage them. And part of this is all wrapped around that idea of monitoring. And you really are monitoring online in the face-to-face environment with individuals or groups. And that whole thing about encouragement, I mean, that's a basic thing in education, but you encourage the individual effort, you encourage students to work with each other, and you encourage them when you see them struggling or not quite as engaged as you'd like. Then the planning for blended learning is like, now that's my joke, I did not make a mistake in spelling, backwards design. Think where you want the students to be at the end of the unit and then plan backwards. You think skills-based and content objectives. What are the skills you're working on? Then you design all the assessments, tying them to those objectives you've decided. Then you split it into those lesson-sized chunks. Again, you're thinking about your blended environment, your online in combination with the face-to-face support. Simple instructions, self-direction, step-by-step learning. You embed your plan. Within your plan, you embed the check-ins, and some of it, of course, you're going to need to provide more support for some students in some classes even. You also have that review part built in using those online tools that you can access and talk about in your face-to-face blended environment. And you're actively planning to encourage the sense of community. I mean, that might not be part of a blended approach, but it certainly does help with just learning in general. Now, this is just a brief image you can look at. You can see her looking through her lenses, thinking backwards for planning. Then the content, you've got to decide on the components you need. And this plan could and should be flexible. Again, you're keeping into account the needs of your learners, and that can be down to the moment, changes as different needs appear. One example of a planning using a schedule-based type of thing is a lesson, say for instance, the end of World War II, where they have an Ed puzzle video with 4 questions, a short video about the Manhattan Project, and a video of Truman warning the Japanese and a statement from the emperor. Then you have an assessment based on those first 3 elements. You schedule the work plan so that you can give the support as needed based on demonstrated needs that you've seen in that blended environment. And then you provide the coaching. And then again, you let them work on the assessment, again, providing that reinforcement in the blended environment, maybe even a combination at the same time of online and face to face. Another example here, another example of a unit, social studies unit planned online. Students go online for music related to their perception of the Vietnam War at home in the US and the overall perception of that. They use a Google slide, they make pages where they embed the songs, then they talk about the songs, the context of the song, the messages, and their influences on the world at the time. You see some example songs they could do that with. Now, again, depending on the needs, you can provide suggestions like that to them, whether it's a project on the Cold War or something else. And deciding what to do online and what to do in person is kind of a hard thing for me to describe because I kind of look at it as one thing together. You're planning it at the same time. Again, you're planning your start using that backwards design approach. It really does work. You think about the basic tech that's going to be needed. You evaluate your classes individually, like I've already said, different needs. Then you engage in the coaching. You plan for the coaching, and the coaching sometimes need to be done on the fly based on what you see. And decide what to do online and what to do in person. Again, start in the middle of lessons, the beginning, engaging. What are some possibilities that you could use for check-ins? The end of the lesson, how will you end it in an engaging way? Where will your lesson point to the next lesson? Or are you just going to summarize? Then involve some type of reflection, kind of like a design-based approach, reflection for the students to do, and then you reflect on what you've seen. And this final example, looking back to the World War II thing where they had the three elements to review before they did the assessment, and you can modify that based on the observed abilities. You monitor their work while they're doing the work. You monitor it in the physical classroom, but you're using the online tools to do it. Then you think, based on your observations of how they work, how much feedback needs to be done when you're actually sitting down afterwards and writing on their document. And here are the references.